The following story is real and some of its parts can still be found on the internet in various journalistic articles. As for what is supernatural, I could not assure anything beyond what I can assure. I experienced it firsthand. It was left to your discretion and of those who hear about this story. What was published on their channel, the conclusions or theories of what happened will be concluded. Shortly before entering high school, I had very good news. A school would begin to be built in my neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, and I wouldn't have to enter one of the ones that were already in the most urbanized area, the closest of which was 2 public transports or 45 minutes away. The best news of all is that my best friends Isabel and Julia would also enter this new secondary school with me. My friend Isabel's family was not well off financially. The truth is, she confessed to us that if the school had not opened so close to us, she would not have been able to study that year. My family, another friend, Julia, on the other hand, was quite solvent, perhaps too wealthy to live in that neighborhood, and they had considered her going to a private school if it meant a daily trip to the city anyway. But the school opened this newly created secondary school, and we continued together. I wish it had never happened. We lived through it later. We were a few months into that first year of high school when Isabel began to act a little strange with us. She left early, disappeared at times, left us alone when we agreed to do homework, and she made excuses to stop going out with us, even though we all helped her. When, for example, it came to going to a place where we were going to spend, we paid for what she bought. The strangest thing of all is that there was, or seemed to be, someone who perhaps was changing her. A boy we first assumed, and according to us, we confirmed it. Because when we are on breaks in the distance, we can see the figure of a boy, a man rather, watching us. Isabel in fact exaggerated in her intention of not paying attention to him, and even diverting the subject when we mentioned how bizarre it was. The subject always about 200 meters from the school playgrounds that were without a fence, by the way, and he watched us intently without making movements. It was always a distance enough to not be able to recognize his features. The school was at the end of a street where there were no houses or businesses yet, and behind it we had a hill that led to some hills. They say there were ranches in that direction a few kilometers away, but the truth is that from school the only thing you saw was deserted. Isabel never told us anything about it. Not a word, even though it was evident that she knew him. Somehow she knew something about him that we didn't, and it's hard for me to write the rest of the story. Isabel disappeared. We said goodbye when we left school, as if nothing had happened, and she never came home. In the following days, Margarita, Juliana, and we made thousands of theories in our heads. None of them, however, came to mind. I was completely convinced, and not knowing it made me think more than about helping. I would not have abandoned his family in one way or another for any reason, and none of us wanted to mention the man we saw watching us. 5 days later, they found the body of Isabel, about 400 meters from the school at the bottom of a ravine, near the hill, was killed by crushing her head with a stone, contrary to what was speculated at the beginning, and which was even published in the news at that time. No, she had been sexually abused. Someone for no apparent reason and without any motivation took her life. Even though at that time we were already on vacation, an event was held at the school that we all attended. We also collected money to help to her family. When we brought the money, I remember well her mother told us about the dreams that Isabel had had for months. Dreams in which a man with a blurry face was taking her away, and she, motionless without being able to speak, was unable to ask help. I don't know if these dreams and quotes that she told her mother were actually a reflection of what she was experiencing. In reality, I don't know if what she saw in her dreams, maybe later it started to haunt her during the day, and I don't know what it was what we saw. But after they told us this, Margarita began to deny everything. Shortly after, she continued to deny it. I don't know what they are talking about. We never saw anyone. She told us it was our imagination. Nothing more, she said, and out of nowhere it stopped coming together. With us, it was just Juliana and I, trying to survive that grief. At that stage of our life, and after losing our best friend in the most horrible way we could imagine. It was difficult the rest of the year. The whole second and third year was difficult. For a moment we could forget it, Until that day, in a very normal break, Alejandro, a boy from our classroom, permanently in love with Juliana, had a talk with us. About 60 meters away from us was Margarita and her friends, those with whom she began to hang out since she stopped being part of our small group. In the midst of the laughter and nonsense, I felt a chill. I felt a look. I turned to Margarita and she looked pale. With his head, he only signaled for me to look towards the hill. There was the man watching us, close enough to feel his horrifying gaze, but at a distance from which again we could not recognize his face. We were sure. It was the same tall and slightly bent silhouette, the same strange clothing, and that same way of observing in the most disturbing way you can imagine. Behind his back, I remember, behind his back was the path that led to the ravine where they found Isabel. I touched Juliana to make her look, and I felt how she almost fainted, but Alejandro held her. She became very ill. We took her to the office since we did not have an infirmary, and Margarita ran after us. It was the same man. We had no doubts, and despite that we were not sure who he was or if he had actually had anything to do with what happened to Isabel. There was something in that vision that terrified us to the point of paralysis. What I felt in my chest that day when I saw it, I will not forget it, and I hope I never feel it again. The next day it was there again. But there was no way to accuse it. Explain that somehow we knew it had something to do with what had happened to our friend. To the third day, Juliana never returned to school, even though we were in the middle of the school year. She changed to a private school in the city, and in fact, she did not speak to us again. When I was left alone, I ended up joining Margarita's group, but faced with that we lived, because of what scared only the two of us. Almost every recess we ended up separating and getting together. Just the two of us. The last few months we stopped going out to the patio during recess due to the fear of seeing him again, and in fact when I entered high school I preferred to take a long path. It made me waste 20 minutes rather than passing through that street in front of the high school. For fear of seeing that man with a blurry face in the distance, Margarita entered a different school, and little by little our contact was reduced, including the exchange of some birthday congratulations. However, not long ago, while at university, I began to have dreams, with the vision of that man in the distance, an image that still terrified me despite that I am already an adult, and that he ruled my days completely. When I dreamed about him, and in those days one early morning at around 4 in the morning, I woke up to a message from my husband. It was Margarita. The message included a link to the news that some of you have probably seen recently, about a girl who died a few hours earlier in a car accident. Juliana said the message, and I didn't ask her how she knew it because the note didn't mention any man. But in the morning I checked. There was no alcohol involved in the accident. The report said, only a girl who apparently lost control of her vehicle and crashed it head-on into a retaining wall at high speed. In that note published on social networks, some idiot, some curious person who he approached the accident and took, I don't know why. Juliana posted a photo of his body. In the comments when I saw it, I removed it before I could recognize anything beyond a completely destroyed body. I guess the guy was quickly reported and blocked from republishing it on social media, because I never came across that horrible image again. I'm afraid to ask Margarita who it was about. I'm afraid to ask her if I have also been dreaming about this man or if he has returned to it. Let's see. I want to believe that it was an accident, but it gives me an irrational fear. I know, to think that this man, what a thing, could have something to do with it. A completely irrational fear that is unfounded, but that doesn't let me live. I know it may seem ridiculous. I know that many are going to say that they have nothing to do with the group or the theme of this channel, but thank you for allowing me to express it. It is of great help to me, especially every time I dream of that figure watching me close but far enough away, so as not to be able to recognize his face.